the Paultooreal controversy just took a darker turn. Another young woman has come forward with disturbing claims that back up what others have already said, and this time, the details are even harder to ignore. From secret backroom exchanges and alleged substance use, to police involvement, racial slurs, and unwanted touching, her story paints a picture of chaos that lines up with multiple other accounts. And she's not the only one. Another guest from that same night is now speaking out too, calling Paul a hypocrite for preaching faith online while behaving very differently behind closed doors. With leaked videos, frantic messages begging for content to be deleted, and Paul himself pushing back, saying it's all fake, the situation is spiraling fast. These are still allegations, but with each new voice stepping forward, the pattern is becoming harder to dismiss. And if more receipts drop, this may only be the beginning. The first girl who spoke out made it very clear, she wasn't an influencer, she wasn't chasing clout, and she didn't have a big platform. In her own words, she was just an ordinary guest who happened to get invited. And that's what makes her story so compelling, because she had nothing to gain from putting herself in the middle of this drama. She describes arriving at Paultooreal's party expecting something lighthearted. Guests were in flowy summer outfits, music was blasting, and for a moment, it had almost the vibe of a high school prom. Paul had called it a no-alcohol gathering, which gave her the impression that it might actually be safe for younger attendees. But like most dry parties, it didn't stay that way for long. Very quickly, she began noticing things that didn't add up. For one, Paul wasn't exactly playing host. Instead of mingling or hyping up the event, he slipped away from his own party. And for anyone who's ever been to a house party, you know, that's strange. Most hosts want to be the center of attention. But Paul? He quietly disappeared into the back with a mystery girl and a couple of close friends. That's when curiosity got the better of her. She followed, and what she says she saw next could have been ripped straight out of a dark teen drama. In a quiet corner, two blonde guys wearing black hoodies approached Paul. She remembers their hair clearly, one bleached blonde, the other messy blonde-brown, and she insists they weren't even trying to be discreet. According to her, they pulled out bags filled with pills and a weird green plant and handed it directly to Paul. But that wasn't the part that scared her most. She claims these same guys then turned their attention to Zuza, who, let's not forget, is a minor. She says they tried to offer her the substances right there in the open. And this witness immediately stepped in, pulling Zuza away before things could escalate. She even pointed out that Zuza hasn't spoken publicly about this because if she did, the police could get involved. Think about that for a second. This was supposed to be a safe party, no alcohol, no wild behavior. Yet here was the host himself allegedly receiving bags of substances, while his guests, including underage ones, were being approached with offers. And from that moment on, the vibe of the night completely shifted for her. The carefree, summer dance feeling was gone. Instead, she says it felt like there was something much darker happening just out of sight. And the scariest part? Paul wasn't just around it, he was right in the middle of it. After pulling Zuza away from that backroom scene, the witness tried to shake it off and blend back into the main crowd. On the surface, the party still looked normal, music blasting, people dancing, everyone pretending nothing shady had just gone down. But in her mind, the vibe had shifted completely. She couldn't stop thinking about what she had just seen, Paul getting handed bags of pills, and a minor nearly pulled into it. And that uneasy feeling only grew stronger as the night went on. She began noticing other random guys heading back toward the same area where Paul had disappeared earlier. Almost like there was a rotation, with people sneaking off in groups. At this point, she was faced with a choice: stay in the main crowd and ignore it, or see for herself what was really going on behind the scenes. She chose to follow her instincts. And when she went back to that side room, she says the sight that greeted her was terrifying. Paul, the host of the entire party, was sprawled out, completely unconscious. This wasn't just someone who needed water or fresh air. She says he was out cold, the kind of pass out that makes everyone around freeze because they don't know if he's even breathing. Panic spread quickly. Someone called an ambulance. Guests were whispering, some laughing nervously, others clearly scared. The girl remembers thinking, how does a host get so wasted at a dry party that an ambulance has to be called? But the chaos didn't stop there. Before the paramedics could even arrive, Paul suddenly jolted awake. And instead of being relieved, she says it turned violent fast. He allegedly began swinging at anyone who got close, wild, out-of-control punches aimed at his own guests. Even she says he tried to hit her. And in the middle of all this, she claims Paul started shouting slurs. Most notably, the N-word. That moment was caught on camera, and clips of it are now circulating on TikTok, slowed down, replayed, dissected. Paul's defenders call it AI, saying it was faked. But for those who were there, like this witness, it wasn't a robotic filter. It was real, it was raw, and it was disturbing. The situation had already gone too far, but it was about to get even worse. Because just as the ambulance pulled up, the police arrived too. And what happened next made her decide she'd seen enough. She walked away from the night completely. By the time the ambulance and police showed up, the party was in full chaos. What was supposed to be a safe, dry night had turned into a scene with flashing lights, people panicking, and Paul at the center of it all. The first witness says that as officers tried to take control of the situation, Paul wasn't calming down. If anything, his behavior escalated. In the middle of being pulled away, she claims he reached out toward a group of younger girls who were standing nearby. To her, it wasn't just reckless, it was alarming. She described it as the moment where she decided she was done. Think about it, up until then, she had already seen him disappear with strangers carrying pills, she'd pulled a minor out of danger, she'd watched him pass out so badly an ambulance was called, she'd heard him allegedly scream racial slurs, and she'd seen him swing at his own guests. But it was the sight of him trying to grab at those younger girls that crossed the final line for her. That was the breaking point. She walked out and didn't look back. And here's the thing, her story doesn't stand alone. Clips from that night circulated online, screenshots spread across TikTok, and more voices started stepping forward to back her up. What once sounded like one person's wild story now started looking like part of a disturbing pattern. But as bad as this first account sounds, the drama didn't stop there. Because another girl, someone who also attended that same night, soon shared her own experience. And what she revealed didn't just make Paul look reckless. It made him look hypocritical. While the first witness painted a picture of chaos and danger, the second girl, Gidget, also known as Gig Jones, focused on something different, Paul's hypocrisy. And in many ways, her story hit even harder because it clashed directly with the image Paul had carefully built online. Gidget made it clear from the start that she didn't see herself as a victim. She wasn't there to chase drama or play the role of someone who was pressured. In fact, she openly admitted that everyone in the room was drinking and partying. But what made her speak up was how Paul was acting in private compared to the way he preaches to his followers in public. This is the same guy who regularly posts about his relationship with God, warning his audience that a relationship without Jesus is just lust. Yet behind closed doors, Gidget says he was doing the exact things he condemned, drinking heavily, smoking, and surrounding himself with girls in ways that raised red flags. She describes how Paul was one of the only guys at the party, and instead of being respectful, he took advantage of it. According to her, he touched multiple girls, on their thighs, arms, and shoulders, just hovering around them throughout the night. And while most of the girls there were single, she wasn't. Her boyfriend was standing right next to her. Still, she says Paul reached over and touched her thigh. That was the moment she realized it wasn't harmless. She immediately pulled away, swiped his hand off, and avoided him for the rest of the night. In her own words, weirdo. She couldn't believe he would do that in front of her boyfriend and with no shame. And the irony didn't stop there. Later that same night, Paul was seen making out with another girl. Rumors spread online that they slept together, but Gidget clarified she didn't think that was true. Even so, the optics were bad. This was the man talking about purity, faith, and morality on social media, yet here he was acting the complete opposite. She even shared that the whole vibe of the party revolved around Paul, almost like he was the main attraction. People crowded around him, laughing at his jokes, recording him, and boosting his ego. Gidget said it felt like everyone was meat-riding Paul, and she was so uncomfortable with how fake it all felt that she posted a Snapchat story calling it out. That single post would end up blowing the lid off everything. Because once that Snapchat leaked, it didn't just show hypocrisy, it exposed the start of a much bigger scandal. If Section 4 exposed Paul's hypocrisy, Section 5 is where things exploded publicly. Because Gidget didn't just stay silent about what she witnessed, she posted. At the time, she wasn't trying to start a scandal. She uploaded a short clip to her private Snapchat story, captioned with the words, "Why is everybody meet writing Paul?" In her eyes, it was a throwaway joke, calling out how the entire party seemed to revolve around Paul like he was some main attraction, even though, as she put it, we all knew what kind of person he was. But what she didn't know was that someone on that private story screen recorded her post. That single clip made its way to TikTok, and from there, it spread like wildfire. Other users reposted, stitched, and dissected it until it snowballed into a trending scandal. Suddenly, Gidget's private commentary wasn't just between friends, it was on the internet for millions to see. And that's when the panic set in. According to Gidget, her phone started blowing up with messages, some from random girls at the party, but most importantly, from Paul himself. She says he spammed her with texts, repeating please, 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 and begging her to take the video down. At first, she thought he was just worried about her Snapchat story, but when someone forwarded her the TikTok, she realized it was already too late. The internet had seen it. The timing couldn't have been worse for Paul. Clips from that night were already circulating, people were debating whether certain recordings were AI or real, and now Gidget's leak was giving them fresh ammunition. She says that once people began dismissing the original video as fake, she decided to release even more pictures and clips from that night, receipts that showed what really went down. And here's where Paul made another mistake. When Gidget confronted him later about touching her thigh, she says he didn't deny it. Instead, he admitted he had been drunk. But that admission opened up another issue. She pointed out that if he was drunk right at the start of the party, it meant he had either been drinking before arriving, or worse, he drove there drunk. In just a matter of days, what started as a private Snapchat post snowballed into a full-blown scandal. Not only was Paul facing accusations of hypocrisy and inappropriate behavior, but now he was scrambling behind the scenes, begging people to delete videos, while new evidence kept leaking to TikTok. And yet, instead of owning up or staying quiet, Paul decided to fight back. By this point, multiple girls had spoken out, TikTok was flooded with clips, and Gidget's private Snapchat leak had spiraled into a viral scandal. The internet was demanding answers, and Paultooreal finally decided to respond. But instead of admitting to the accusations or staying quiet, he went on the offensive. In his statement, Paul flat out denied almost everything. He claimed that none of the allegations were true, except for one. He admitted that yes, he drank at the party and yes, he tried nicotine that night. He said he used the word addicted while drunk, but that it wasn't real addiction, just a bad choice he regretted. Everything else, he insisted, was a lie. According to Paul, the clips circulating online were manipulated. He said people had created fake Snapchat accounts designed to look like his, but with slight differences, just to make it seem like he was posting incriminating things. He also said the viral video of him yelling racial slurs was AI generated, not real. In his words, people were twisting and fabricating content just to tear him down. Paul also addressed the accusations of hypocrisy. He admitted he posts about faith, relationships, and God, but he insisted his old posts being resurfaced were just jokes or trending memes at the time. He argued that critics were deliberately pulling things out of context to paint him as a fraud. On top of that, he tackled the relationship rumors. He said that taking a photo or filming a video with a girl doesn't mean he's dating her. As an influencer, he explained, brand trips and collaborations naturally put him around female creators. But, in his words, have I ever said any of them were my girlfriend in my content? No. He claimed he had only been in a few serious relationships, and when they were real, he was open about them. Paul wrapped up his response by flipping the narrative. He insisted he wasn't the predator, he was the victim. According to him, this was to cancel culture at its worst, a wave of cyberbullying meant to destroy his reputation. He said he wasn't going to apologize for things he didn't do and made it clear he wouldn't let lies define him. But here's the thing, while Paul was busy calling the accusations fake, more girls were hinting that they had their own stories, some even claiming to have receipts that hadn't been posted yet. Which means Paul's fight to prove his innocence might just be beginning. Once Paul released his statement, the internet split into two camps, and the backlash was immediate. On one side were his defenders. These were fans who had followed him for years, people who wanted to believe his story about AI manipulation, fake accounts, and cancel culture. They argued that influencers are easy targets, and that anyone can take a clip, edit it, or use AI to make someone look guilty. For them, Paul was a victim of the internet's hunger for scandal. But on the other side, the louder side, were the skeptics. To them, the mounting testimonies from multiple girls were impossible to ignore. Each account had slightly different details, but the overall picture was the same: parties that got out of control, inappropriate touching, reckless drinking, racial slurs, and shady behavior that kept repeating. For many, it didn't look like cancel culture, it looked like a pattern. TikTok especially became the courtroom. Clips from that night were stitched, slowed down, zoomed in, and reposted thousands of times. Some users pointed out that Paul's voice in the viral video didn't sound robotic at all, it sounded exactly like him. Others pulled up past posts and memes Paul had shared, analyzing them frame by frame, asking, were these jokes, or were they warning signs hiding in plain sight? Meanwhile, the witnesses themselves were gaining attention. Gidget's decision to release more photos and videos was celebrated by some as proof she wasn't lying, while others criticized her for leaking more content instead of keeping it private. The first anonymous witness who pulled Zuza away was praised for protecting a minor, but her story also raised bigger questions, like how many other underage guests had been at Paul's parties. And hovering over all of this was the suspense, because as more voices joined in, several hinted that they weren't done yet. Some suggested they had receipts, texts, videos, or screenshots that hadn't even been posted publicly. That left the internet wondering, is this everything, or is there another wave of accusations still to come? For Paul, this wasn't just about clearing his name anymore. It was about survival, because the court of public opinion was already turning against him. By the time all these stories, clips, and denials had collided, Paul's carefully crafted image was in ruins. For years, he branded himself as a positive influencer, posting about faith, sharing messages about love, and presenting himself as someone his audience could trust. But now, every post, every video, every meme he had ever shared was being re-examined under a microscope. Brands that once associated with him quietly began pulling away. On TikTok, former fans unfollowed in droves, while others stuck around just to watch the drama unfold. Even within his own circles, trust seemed to be slipping. Friends who used to defend him stayed silent, and those who did speak up often made the situation worse by contradicting his version of events. The scariest part for Paul, though, is that this doesn't feel like the peak of the scandal, it feels like the beginning. Multiple girls are hinting that they have more to share. Some have suggested they've kept receipts, screenshots, private messages, or even unreleased clips that could make things look even worse if they go public. In other words, what we've seen so far might just be the tip of the iceberg. For his critics, this isn't about cancel culture. It's about accountability. They argue that too many people looked the other way for too long while Paul built a platform preaching values he wasn't living up to. And for his defenders, even if they believe Paul, they can't ignore that the sheer volume of similar accusations paints a picture that's hard to dismiss. The internet is now in a waiting game. Will more victims step forward? Will hard evidence finally surface to back up the allegations? Or will Paul find a way to weather the storm and rebuild his reputation? Right now, it feels less like the end of the story, and more like the calm before an even bigger wave. Scandals like this don't exist in a vacuum. The Paultooreal controversy is bigger than just one influencer, it's a mirror reflecting the darker side of internet fame. For years, influencer culture has thrived on carefully curated images, preaching values, promoting positivity, and selling audiences on the idea of trust. But behind the scenes, the stories often tell a different tale. What we're seeing with Paul is the same pattern that has played out with countless creators before him, a brand built on wholesomeness, suddenly shattered when receipts, testimonies, and contradictions start surfacing. The reason these stories hit so hard is because of the power imbalance. Influencers like Paul aren't just regular party hosts, they're people with millions of followers, brand deals, and influence over young fans. When they step into real-world situations, they carry that influence with them, which can blur boundaries and create environments where accountability is harder to enforce. The internet has also become its own courtroom. In Paul's case, TikTok users slowed down clips, compared voices, pulled up old posts, and pieced together timelines, essentially acting as digital detectives. It shows how scandals today don't just spread, they're dissected, analyzed, and replayed in real time. And once that happens, cancel culture or not, the damage is often irreversible. At the same time, these situations raise tough questions. How much of what we see online is authentic? How much grace should we give influencers when they make mistakes? And at what point do repeated accusations stop being just stories and start being a pattern that demands accountability? For Paul, this isn't just about one party gone wrong. It's about whether his brand of faith, positivity, and influence can survive when so many people are saying his private actions don't match his public image. And for the audience, it's a reminder that in influencer culture, the truth almost always comes out, sooner or later. So where does this leave everything? Right now, the Paultooreal scandal feels less like a closed story and more like a storm that's just starting to build. On one side, we have multiple women coming forward with consistent details, stories of chaotic parties, substance use, inappropriate touching, violent outbursts, and hypocrisy behind closed doors. Their testimonies line up in ways that make it harder and harder to dismiss them as coincidence. And with some hinting they still have unreleased receipts, screenshots, texts, and videos, the possibility of new evidence dropping at any time keeps the internet on edge. On the other side, we have Paul himself. He admits to drinking and trying nicotine, but denies everything else. He insists the worst clips are AI fakes, that people are twisting jokes into attacks, and that cancel culture has turned him into a victim. His strategy is clear: own up to one mistake, deny the rest, and frame the situation as cyberbullying. The problem for Paul is that this isn't just about one accusation anymore. It's about a pattern that fans, critics, and TikTok detectives are all piecing together in real time. And whether or not every detail is proven, the perception of who Paul is, and what he stands for, has already shifted. For his followers, the question is simple: do you believe the Paul who posts about faith and positivity, or the Paul described by the people who were actually at these parties? For brands, the decision is even clearer: stay associated with him and risk the backlash, or quietly walk away. As more voices speak up, one thing is certain: this story isn't over. It could fade, or it could erupt into something much bigger depending on what receipts, if any, come out next. And for Paultooreal, the choice is also clear: either face the allegations head-on and provide proof to back his claims, or watch as the internet makes up its mind without him. Because in influencer culture, silence is loud, and denial without evidence rarely convinces anyone.